Hi there, and welcome to Talking True. As you may know, I have the great pleasure of interviewing people who are mystics, who've gone through near death experiences or radical shifts of consciousness, ordinary people like you and me, who are living in extraordinary ways and essentially living true to our authentic being, our authentic nature. And today's no exception. I have a wonderful guest who's joining me. His name is Olli Montonen, and he's based in Finland. And he has quite the story to tell. So we'll be diving in and finding out what happened on his own journey of recognizing the truth of the self. So, Olli, thank you for joining me today. It's great to have you on Talking True.
Thank you, Julie, so much. It's good to be here.
So you shared with me about your story of kind of waking up when you were at a low point in your life. Do you want to detail that for viewers so that they can get a sense of who you are and what happened to you?
Yeah, sure. Well, you know, I would say I was born in a very ordinary family and had a very ordinary childhood. I would say I had a happy childhood and went to high school and then went to university. But I think all this ordinary stuff I never really understood what life is about. So I kind of um, I would say I don't know if it's not really a wrong track, but I had a pretty big like drinking problem already, and I had severe problems that were debilitating to me at the time, and I also had no real sense of control. It felt like I was just gliding through life without any real ability to change anything that I wanted to change. And so things came to a head. I've always been an entrepreneur, so I lost all my money, finances. I also didn't get a university degree, and I felt like from my small perspective, I felt like a total failure. And in Finland, if you lose all your money, it doesn't really mean the end of you. You just go to a social welfare office to get some government money. But I felt enormous shame that my life I had collapsed in this way, that I had no money and I had no alternative but to resort to this kind of government aid. And as I was sitting there in the social welfare office, a thought came to me. It was like, now I am nothing. And then maybe a few seconds passed, and I was filled with like this absolute joy. Like I was very surprised. I had to check, am I still poor? Am I still in this, social welfare office situation? Yes, yes. But the inner experience of how it felt to sit there with everybody else was completely different. I loved it. I loved being this apparent nobody, and I was like, why hasn't anyone spoken to me of how great it is to be this nobody? So that was the first glimpse. I had very little understanding of anything spiritual or I had no understanding of any non-dual philosophy, but I did understand that what I now call the sort of default happiness hypothesis, that happiness is due to some sort of living well or having a certain amount of financial security or whatever. I understood that had to be false because nothing could explain this experience of pure joy. And yeah, that was like the first glimpse. It maybe lasted for a couple of weeks. I don't remember, but something shifted. then. And since then, my life has been, it has taken a more harmonious turn. It hasn't been easy, or that everything sort of just worked out instantly, not at all. But there was this, I guess there was, since that event, there was always somehow this realization I could get back to if things got a little too heated or intense. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the short version of the first glimpse.
Yeah, I mean, I love that because, there's a few things I'd love to speak to. One is obviously we are hardwired, especially in the West, to believe that happiness comes from outer conditions, having the right job or having the right amount of money or possessions. We really believe that our happiness is predicated by, material accumulation. And of course, when you have a shift of consciousness like you had, then you see that none of that means anything. Because of course, the point is anyway, these things can be gained and lost in an instant. So this capacity to see through all of that obviously clearly happened in your case, and it does happen to quite a few people who have to undergo the same things. There's that, and also the other thing I wanted to speak to was that there's my understanding is that in your country in particular there is a high tendency towards alcohol addiction because of the light. Is that accurate?
Well, I I would say there is the tendency. I'm not sure if the culprit is actually the light, so I wouldn't probably sign off on that. But it's definitely fair to say Finnish people struggle more with alcohol than the rest, many other countries. That would be very fair to say that.
Yes, I think the report I read was that it's because doesn't it get dark at 2 or 3 in the afternoon in the winter? So
Yeah.
you're dealing with more darkness, and of course the sunlight does have an effect. I just wanted to kind of throw that in to get your perspective.
Yeah.
But so you had this clear moment of seeing that lasted, how long did you say? A few weeks?
Yeah, the like feeling awesome part lasted for probably a couple of weeks. I also made use of it, and then I wrote an application for a job that I did get. It was my only application, and I got a job, which was ultimately wrong for me. But in any case, it was a very liberating and spontaneous period in my life.
And then I'm guessing there was a period of integration, right? Because these things really do have to be integrated so
Yeah,
that so that you can live from that space. So
yeah.
what was that like for you?
Well, I in the first years, this was 2015, so I also engaged in psychotherapy during those years, and I had a very lovely therapist, and she was very understanding of the sort of spiritual perspective as well. So it was, um, I had help integrating also that way, and I think the most clarifying answer would be if I summarize the next few years, because I would say there have been three major glimpses, and that was the first. So the second, like I briefly mentioned, I got a job at a marketing agency. I didn't really like it much, and like after 9 months, I got fired, and then. After the day after getting fired, I went outside, and then I experienced this sort of stillness beyond what I've ever experienced. For it was like every rusty trash can in the street was glowing. Like it was like, I don't know. It was just so beautiful, and I walked in that incredible silence all day. So that was like the second glimpse, and that was when I made the decision really to sort of, I don't know, officially get into spirituality, because now it had happened twice at a point that would normally be considered a negative outcome. But my experience was that I kept just filling up with joy, and so I that was probably the point I started reading more these great Eastern spiritual teachers like Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta Maharaj, and I also read Eckhart Tolle, who is very, of course, famous, and so this led to, I would say, to a third glimpse, which happened after meditation. This was the year, I think, 2018, and this is when I quite spontaneously, I would say, I fell, or it felt like I was completely absorbed in my being. And I had never felt this was like, it was different from the experiences before. It was when I looked at my hand, I would see the stars. It was like the body had taken this kind of cosmic, it was almost transparent, and I didn't feel any sort of sense of time, and also there was an ecstasy present I had never felt. Like physically, also it felt enormously good. So I would say that was like the third glimpse, and now looking at it, I would say that perhaps the first glimpse showed me that there was this unconditional peace and love. And perhaps the third glimpse somehow helped me to recognize what consciousness actually, what is the nature of this awareness that I am. And after the third glimpse, I was really interested in very particular teachings, which are usually known as the direct path teachings. I was interested in nothing else for years.
Mhm.
And this path also led me eventually last year to meet my teacher, Francis Lucille, who is also the teacher of one called Rupert Spira, who is pretty well known. But yeah, so I would say that after this third glimpse, the journey started very much into this self-inquiry, inward-facing path into the nature of reality. But I think I already sort of recognized that, and this has been like a journey to fully understand,
Yes.
to be able to recognize that in every moment, what I recognized that in that glimpse. So that is the bit longer version of
Mhm.
what happened to me.
Yes. Well, look, the point of, I've heard of both of those teachers, and the point of any teacher is that all they're doing is pointing to what is already here and what you already are. And, obviously, teachers take different forms and shapes and so on, but ultimately the work is to recognize that what they're pointing to is already here and you are prior to the story. And so, are you still studying with those teachers, or are you deepening into your own self-recognition? Where are you at with that?
Uh, I'm definitely in love with seeing Francis, and uh, there is perhaps, I don't know if it is a real distinction, but for example, Francis saw his teacher Jean Klein 20 years after his recognition. So we are very, where I'm at, everyone is very liberal. Do what you enjoy. There is no sort of, if you want to be alone, be alone. If you want to be with a group of friends, be with a group of friends. So But
Yes.
ultimately, I'm very much enjoying staying with Francis, and I would say it has had a very after meeting Francis, many of the, maybe I would call them smaller dysfunctional habits, nothing like that wrecks your life, but like what's been there for a long time, they just
Mhm.
like
Yes.
vanished. So I felt that being with Francis has somehow accelerated the integration process.
Yes.
And of course, clarified some questions also what I have, but I think some on some other the main impact has been on perhaps on some other level than just the understanding. It's accelerating the integration process. That's what I would
Yes.
say.
Yes. But you know, and ultimately, the mind can never wrap itself around the truth of who you are, right? It's just
Yeah.
it's really impossible. I mean, it can be helpful, but to have an embodied teacher, I think, or a guru, or whatever, however you want to sort of term it, can be really beneficial, because you're actually seeing the embodiment of a seeming other, um, that reflects the truth of what you have discovered. So it can be, and you can have conversations too, because of course you can't speak to anybody about these things. So that can be really helpful. So with respect to, your own recognition and all of that, how did that take shape when it came to work? Did you suddenly find something that felt like it fit you and you were able to express in a different way and all of those things? Has your work life been affected?
Yeah, yeah. After actually, it was on the first time I met Francis. It was immediately clear that the, I don't know if it's too grandiose to call it the path of the teacher, but I felt very strongly that that this non-dual understanding in me is no longer content. I would say like the past decade, I have explored the passive implications of the non-dual understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And now there is something that is arising that is absolutely not content with sitting at home and reading. It's compelling. I don't know where it goes, but it's absolutely somehow compelling to share this understanding. I would also like to add one comment about seeing a teacher, for example, in my case, Francis. So I've always had a very curious mind, lots of thoughts, lots of creative thoughts, so it's practically impossible. It has always been impossible for me to even remotely stop the mind in any way. But with Francis, for example, I've been able to explore the intellectual part of these questions, and it seems that the mind is getting more and more satisfied that there is no real verbalized answer to
Mm-hmm.
anything. But I would say for someone like me, it is very good that one can explore all these questions with a teacher, even though the final outcome is that we have to let go of the concepts. But if you try to like force your, it's not right, to try to force your way into this.
Mm-hmm.
If you have questions, you have questions.
Yes. 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 You're right. Um, Happily, I never had that problem, because immediately, I shared prior to coming on to the episode today that, what happened in my case. But the mind in my case became absolutely still and took rest in the heart. It just collapsed into the heart of that recognition, and it stayed there. I mean, sometimes questions do come up, but I've never really kind of thought of myself as an intellectual. I'm very much a kind of, what, as the yogis describe it, a bhakti, somebody that really feels the love for the recognition of the oneself. So the mind hasn't given me too many kind of problems, which I'm really happy about, actually. But I do appreciate that for a lot of people, especially if you are somebody that, you know, is a very smart and kind of has an intellectual orientation, it can be challenging. So having a teacher is very helpful. And ultimately, as you said, what happens anyway is you are led to kind of the questions burn themselves out.
Yeah,
And
exactly. That's very well put. You know, the questions burn themselves out. Yeah.
yeah, but there's a place for that too. You know, everything is honored, and I think it's really great if you can find someone that you can resonate with and have, you know, feel free and have the opportunity to ask those questions and then arrive at this still place, this point of no return, and then not want to move away from that, and, you know, into the whole seeking game, because it's really about the seeking, isn't it? The mind is oriented towards seeking and finding answers
Yeah.
and all of those things. So
Yeah.
yeah, so now and I love what you said about becoming clear that your kind of path or what you're being pointed to is to teach, because that happened to me too. I had no interest at all in ever writing a book or speaking about my discoveries and the shift of consciousness and all of those things. But I was told in a lucid dream, you know, or asked in a lucid dream, when are you writing the book? And then I was given a very clear directive, which was, it's time to take a seat on the altar that is you. That's how it was phrased. And then I was kind of pushed into speaking out and sharing these discoveries. And, you know, I don't like to use the term teacher, because at the end of the day, there is no teacher and there really is no seeker. There's only the oneself expressing, you know, in these ways. But I think it can be helpful for people if you are prompted to share and to speak and take on the role of being a, you know, thought of as a teacher. It can be helpful for people who are, you know, navigating their way through an awakening, because you may have the answer, the one response in language that they're able to hear and to recognize and to see. And it can be really beneficial. So how do you, in terms of your teaching, I know that you have a YouTube channel, but how do you kind of go about that? What is the organic way for you to do that?
Well, it's very honest to admit that things are still taking shape, and um, um, we'll probably have to introduce now the sort of more peculiar aspect of my awakening, this cosmic avatar or force called the celebrating owl, which is it was given to me a few years ago. I was given this name in a ceremony, and it stuck, and then it lay hidden, and then I met Francis, and I don't really know what to make of it. I think it's what some of the ancient cultures referred to as a daimon. I think it's a bit like that, like this kind of a guiding force linked to nature. I don't really know much about that stuff, but yeah. Anyway, so now I'm not only integrating the non-dual understanding, but there is this rising force that wants to be named celebrating owl, and it seems to be like a wilder expression, like more to do with dancing and moving the body, and somehow like it's very strange. It's still happening. I don't have full clarity on what this means, but it seems to be a force that is greater than any mind-made self-inquiry, or it's like an identity that laughs at the non-dual non-dual understanding. In a way, it seems to be something that it's a force that wants to express itself somehow. So now I am thinking, in terms of my life, I'm actually writing I'm writing a book full of these kind of short verses, a bit like the Tao Te Ching, but perhaps even shorter passages. And this was a good, you said that something about there is no teacher. So this is a constant, I don't want to say conflict, but it's on my mind often that if I already am, and if everyone already is this, ultimately this shared being which is beyond birth and death, and it's always at peace. So who am I writing to? I don't know. Yet I don't know honestly, but yeah, the book wants to come out. So yeah, I'm writing a book and then I have this new company called Nonduality, which will which I founded with a partner. Currently our thinking is that we will offer some sort of journeys or courses, some of them completely digital and some of them with a more live presence. That thinking could change. I don't know. So yeah, there's quite a lot of things happening, and like I said, the in all honesty, I have no idea what this is going to look like in a year. Like absolutely none. So
Yes, yeah. Listen, I hear you, because I think the most honest answer for anyone is we don't know anything.
yeah.
And that particularly becomes clearly evident after a shift of consciousness. And then what happens is the small I gets out of the way, and the true I, the true self, or whatever you want to call it, just kind of takes center stage. And you just go with it. Whatever that prompt is, you just go with it. And it feels to me like what you're being called to is just to move into this space of playfulness and to invite people to explore. It kind of feels and looks very shamanic, the owl, with the owl kind of symbology and the message of the owl and all of that, but deeply wise as well. And I think that's a really great way to invite people in to explore that and just play a little and have fun and just see what happens. And you have a YouTube channel with the same name, don't you?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes. So do you present? Do you give presentations or talks, or what does that look like? Just for viewers so they can check you out.
Well, currently I've been at random times just doing these YouTube videos. Could be 10 minutes, could be 30 minutes, topics ranging. I would like to add that there seems to now, for the, I don't know, past month or 6 weeks, there seems to be I do have a certain kind of structure in mind about the teaching, and I think my teaching will have three aspects that also reflect what I experienced. And the first one we are invited to explore is what I call the happiness hypothesis. We explore whether our happiness is due to external circumstances or whether we see any gaps in that theory. So because I think that's pretty easy to it's a pretty easy way and a very useful way to look at, call it non-duality or whatever, doesn't matter to me. But I think happiness matters to all of us. So I think that's the first thing, and the second, I currently call it the model of reality, which at least for someone like me was important because I think we often accept something that is detrimental to our happiness without ever investigating it. So we all have, whether we want to admit it or not, we have some form of model of reality. We all have something. You may not want to expose it to theoretical analysis or like that, but everyone has some form of truth, some form of model of reality we use. So that's, I would say, the happiness, exploring the happiness and exploring our model of reality, they are the more theoretical aspects of my teaching. And the third which we sort of smooth into, I call living presence. And I'm still, still myself learning what this living presence means. But it's for me, it's definitely the most important, most celebratory part of this understanding, and it's as easily found in cooking a favorite meal than or running or whatever your favorite hobbies may be. It seems to me to be the most important, or at least the what it all leads to is this what I call the living presence, which I've had this for the past month or two. I felt this my interest in the theoretical parts of the understanding have downgraded, and there is this wild joy that just wants to somehow be expressed. So that's kind of like the working currently in my mind. If someone would ask, does the celebrating owl have a teaching, I would say it would be those three aspects of the non-dual understanding. The details of what those mean or are still a work in progress.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because it's really the articulation of them that is the difficult part, right? It's the languaging. It's the languaging of it that, I mean, it's impossible to put it into language, but we try, we really try. And the point is to have fun with it and also realize it's not static at all. A lot of people that I've worked with, I found, have a kind of major shift of consciousness, and then they want to keep going back to the kind of the framework of that because they then feel like they've lost it, rather than realizing that it is discovered in everyday simple moments, without the baggage of concepts, just kind of being here directly with what is and working with it and just being kind of open and going with the flow of what is happening, where the pure joy is.
Yeah, I think a metaphor comes to my mind when you speak of this, that, these experiences are like gates. They open you up to explore a land, but you can also get stuck holding to the gate, and you are not going anywhere because it's golden, and it's lovely there, and you just want to keep holding yourself there. So that definitely happened to me. I would, to be honest, it definitely happened to me. And I'm especially drawn. I've always loved all sorts of exotic experiences. I'm honest. I love exotic, mystical, whatever experiences. So this was especially tough
Mm-hmm.
for me. But in this regard, Francis has helped me a lot to point away from those past experiences, and because the identification with the comfortable, pleasurable, ecstatic bodily feelings, it was almost impossible for me to recognize that I'm subtly seeking some form of repetition of those experiences in the present moment, of course simultaneously blocking the recognition, the real recognition of being. And although every spiritual teacher warns about this, it's still it's the lure is very powerful. It's very easy to start to think of enlightenment or spiritual awakening as an experience.
Yes.
It's very easy to fall into that, and I definitely did it a lot.
Yes, yes. And look, by its very nature, an experience has a beginning, a middle, and an end.
Yes.
It's fleeting, it comes and goes.
Yes.
And you can't remain kind of anchored or embodied in an experience that just is here 1 minute and goes the next. And the master yogis speak about this, all great beings speak about the same thing. Don't become attached to the supernatural powers, the siddhis experiences, the out-of-body experiences, meditations, or whatever it is, because they're really just pointing to what is here prior to all of those things and prior to the story. But we're like kids who like candy, right?
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. That's lovely. I love how you put it. That's exactly it. And I think it was probably a few weeks ago. I don't remember, but I really recognized this something that really drove it home for me. That I really recognized the difference between a fantastic experience and this joy of being and happiness, because I never get bored of happiness, but I would get bored of every kind of experience, even if it was the fantastic mystical kind and angels and whatever. I've had some pretty strange experiences, but I would eventually get bored of every kind of experience. But happiness or joy, that that's something that we don't ever get bored of. It's never boring to be happy.
Yes. Well, by contrast, I never got bored with the supernatural powers and the experiences, because whenever I think of them, particularly the first kind of big dramatic experience, which was being given Shaktipat Diksha, the awakening of the Kundalini in a lucid dream by a great being, a great avatar, the energy of that is still alive. It's still profound. It still has the most incredible energy. But what I realized is that, inherent, even though I kind of can describe it as an experience, the energy of it, because it came from a great being, is still very much alive. It's very present. It's still here. It's still vibration. It's still pulsating. You know what I mean? So I think from that perspective, it's different, I guess I could say, because it has that kind of resonance and that energy. But you can't live there. You when you're doing the dishes, for example, you still have to be present with doing the dishes. And if you're overlaying that with concepts about what that should look like, then you're missing the point. You're missing the moment. You're missing what is here and what you're being shown and what is being revealed to you.
Yeah. I will perhaps have more to say on this as the years go by, because I feel the celebrating owl force is like that. Somehow always it's like always like a positive life force. It's something I can go to, and it has this, it's not like an experience in memory. It has a different quality to it. It's like a really really great vibration. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yes, because I think what's happening is you're connecting with the master yogis call it Chaitanya. It's alive with the vibration of source itself, this pulsation. And the reason that probably has so much kind of resonance for you is that there's a call to action in terms of being able to share that with others, this pulsation, this vibration, this awakening, this transmission, whatever you want to call it. So it's more than just an experience, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely makes sense, and it's something like it's also something that's perhaps it's not that often discussed in the non-dual world, but I feel it's also very that's why I've been losing the the conceptual. I think the conceptual framework of non-duality, it helped me to wiggle out of this personal identity, and now it has done its job, and now I know even less.
Yes.
so, so
Yes.
that would be my honest review of where I am. I know even less, but that doesn't somehow diminish the desire to speak on the truth or write about or talk with you, I definitely love to get to know other people who have different kinds of experiences, who come from different backgrounds. All this is very, and this is also one thing I've noticed. I've always been a very curious personality. And at some point, I guess I projected this sort of Zen non-dual, when I am a master, I'm not that interested in different phenomena. I find that to be a complete illusion. I'm more interested in phenomena than ever because I I've always been so. I've always been a curious, very general, open-minded, even in that sort of limited box that I was in before, but it was still true for me and it's still true now. I'm still very intrigued about the world instead of somehow remaining at the word world isn't real as separate objects. That's probably a fact, but I don't really care. I want to explore, live my life, see what comes.
Yes, yes. I mean, I really relate to that because, I haven't been a big fan of non-duality, even though that title's often given to me via my YouTube channel. I've always been kind of very, I guess, yogic
Mm,
and followed the yogic path and the devotional path, the path of
mm.
the bhakti and all of those things. And I've had, all kinds of psychic phenomena and amazing things happening. And for me, it's really about coming down to the kind of the simplest point, being in love with life, loving who I am via the expression of that, sharing that from that place. And you're really absolutely not kind of intellectual about anything, especially when it comes to the way the non-dual teachers describe what you've just said, there's nothing here, it's not real, and all of that. A lot of that, I think it may be based in truth, but I think it's important to really honor the story and honor the expression of who you are. And by doing that, honor other people and also honor the challenges that people are facing and going through as well. Because that part is very important.
Yeah, and I just actually wrote a chapter in my book before this our meeting that, I don't remember it word by word, but it was something like it considered this topic that, if it may be that the magic trick is a very simple, mechanism that the magician does, but without the sort of presentation and building the tension, and it would be boring for most people on this earth.
Yes.
It ultimately it may be that there is a simple, very simple mechanism that they do to perform the trick, but it would not be very interesting to many people. So I think that it's sort of almost irrelevant. We cannot really verbalize the absolute truth. So what's left? Well, expressing ourselves, enjoying life, meeting people. If you want to meet people, you can be someone who doesn't. But for me, I love meeting new people. So all this kind of points to living well, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yes. And also, again, from the tradition that I kind of trained in, great yogis, great beings, Nisargadatta, Ramana, often would teach in silence, but they would also sometimes give pointers through a story, telling a story. As kids, we learn to just sit and kind of empty the mind and listen to a story, right? And we always relate to the characters in the story. So I think telling stories is very helpful in the pointing to and discovering the truth of who you are existing prior to the story. But the kind of the stories can be a doorway,
Mm.
right? And it can be really helpful, I think, to tell stories and tell, especially when you share your own challenges and the things that you've overcome or seen through. And so that's a big part of it.
Yeah, Julie, I agree with you. I've had to think about this topic for a couple of years, but I'm still with my original insight that it's actually very relevant to share things about my addictions, for example,
Yeah,
in relation to the non-dual
yeah.
understanding, so that people who are suffering from those addictions perhaps can at least glimpse that there might be a way to let this resolve itself in a way they have not, understood. I think it's like absolutely vital to anchor the understanding into the everyday challenges. So in this regard, I love talking about the personal challenges. Why? Well, because I'm the one who knows them. I can't really speak as an authority on someone else's,
Hmm.
personal challenges. So I'm the expert here.
Yeah.
But and I think it makes it accessible, interesting. It points to a real life impact rather than a philosophy, which is it's fine if you're interested in a philosophy, but I would like people to, even though I have, of course, much in my how I talk, obviously the direct path teachers and these have influenced that, but I would definitely like to point out that it's not necessary to sort of everyone to be that interested in the theoretical aspects, and I think it's definitely allowed to take a pragmatic aspect, like, okay, I have a drug addiction or an alcohol addiction, and perhaps this would help me. I think that's a very valid, view to take, okay, perhaps you should avoid like defining outcomes, but rather being open. So yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you. I still think the perspective on our challenges and how they relate to this non-duality or awareness are absolutely essential.
Hmm. Yes, yes. Because look, if you have, let's say you have an alcohol addiction, hearing concepts and hearing about non-duality isn't really going to help you with the day-to-day challenges that you're facing, right? It can be much more helpful to hear somebody's story and how they overcame that,
Yeah.
as an authentic way to kind of grapple with what's here right now. So
Yeah. And
yeah,
yeah.
yes. Well, I'm absolutely loving this conversation, but I cannot believe the time. I'm just seeing the time. so, so we'll have to do this again because we definitely have a lot to talk about and a lot to share, and I think we're on the same page, really, in many ways. But before we wrap things up, would you like to just kind of let people excuse me, let people know where they can find you? That would be great.
Yes, so you can, of course, you can visit our YouTube channel, Nondualify, or you can visit our website, nondualify.com. So that those two resources should at least give you something.
Excellent. And is that where you share about your owl? What was it again? You call the
Celebrate now.
celebrating owl. Celebrating
Yeah,
owl.
yeah.
Excellent.
The YouTube channel is there's different kind of stuff here, but that's where I post most of my videos. So if you want to listen, I call it nowadays. I think I call it hoots from silence. I always lose track myself what
Yes, yes, yes,
what
yes.
they are called, but yeah, from the YouTube channel you probably get best access to.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, Ollie, thank you so much for joining me today. This has been really great. And I think very helpful for those people who had a kind of an awakening and are kind of integrating and moving through this whole process. It's been very helpful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Julie.
And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you're watching the live or if you're watching later via the recordings, thank you, thank you, thank you so much. I really appreciate you being here. It's really great. If you feel that this content has value, then please spread the word. And if you haven't subscribed yet, you know what to do. So thank you again. take it easy, be well, and until next time, bye-bye.